$1 million Daughter. Chapter 1. The Slap That Changed Everything. I thought he was my hero, until the night he turned into my enemy. Tasha was standing by the sink in a little house on the east side of Montgomery, Alabama, when it happened. She was only 13, thin as a stick, scrubbing dishes she hadn't even eaten from. Her foster mama, Geneva, stormed into the kitchen like a tornado, lifted the pot lid, and froze. One piece of chicken was missing. "Who ate my drumstick?" Geneva's voice cracked like thunder. The twins, her real kids, scattered to the corner with wide eyes. Tasha's hands shook, but she whispered, "I didn't touch it." Wrong answer. A hot slap landed across her cheek so fast she saw stars. Her head tilted sideways like somebody just unplugged her. "You ungrateful girl," Geneva spat. "We picked you up out of pity, raised you like you was ours. And you pay us back by stealing? Lord have mercy." Tasha wanted to scream, wanted to say, "Y'all only kept me to look good at church." But she bit her tongue. She'd learned a long time ago that talking back only made the fire worse. Then Geneva's husband, Mr. Clyde, walked in with his belly hanging over his belt and that looked like he already decided the verdict. He said flat as a hammer, "She gotta go tonight." "Please," Tasha stammered. "I didn't steal nothing. I'm hungry, but I didn't—" "Pack? What pack? You don't own nothing here." Geneva cut her off. She grabbed Tasha by the arm, yanked her to the door, and shoved her outside barefoot, still dripping dishwater from her hands. The twins peeked out from behind the curtain, whispering like it was a scary movie. The door slammed, lock clicked, and silence fell. Just like that, Tasha was out. No shoes, no bag, no goodbyes. Only the warm Alabama night and the gravel biting into her bare feet. She stood there, stunned, cheek still burning, heart pounding. Neighbors peeked from their windows, but nobody stepped out. Folks didn't like getting in other people's business. That's how it always was. Tasha started walking, though she didn't know where. The streets hummed with passing cars, and somewhere down the block a dog barked like it was laughing at her misery. Her stomach growled louder than her footsteps. She hadn't had a bite of meat in weeks, and the thought of that missing drumstick felt like some cruel joke. By the time she reached the corner store, the lights flickered above her like tired stars. She thought about begging inside, but shame sat heavy on her chest. She just kept moving, dragging her feet past folks who didn't even glance her way. To them, she was invisible already. Finally, she curled up behind a dumpster, the smell of old fries and spoiled milk filling her nose. She pressed her knees to her chest, whispering into the dark, "God, what did I do wrong? Why don't nobody want me?" No answer came, only the buzz of a broken streetlight and the sound of her own breath. Lying there, she thought about the way Geneva's hand stung worse than the gravel under her feet. She thought about how quick people could switch from calling you family to calling you burden. And she realized something that night. Sometimes the folks who say they love you the loudest are the first to push you out when they feel like it. Her eyes watered, but she refused to cry loud. Crying only made people feel stronger about hurting you. So she stayed quiet, hugging herself in the shadows, listening to the city breathe while she tried not to disappear completely. That was the night Tasha learned the streets don't open their arms. They just watch, cold and hungry, waiting to see if you'll survive the first slap life throws at you, or if you'll crumble. Chapter 2. Nights on the Street. The first night out there hit Tasha like a punch to the gut. She curled up behind a dumpster, listening to rats scurry and bottles clink as somebody searched the trash. The smell was bad enough to make her gag, but she figured better the stink than getting caught in the open. The ground was hard. Her stomach was louder than the crickets, and every time a car drove by, she thought maybe they'd stop and ask if she was okay. Nobody did. By sunrise, she was weak, her eyes heavy like she hadn't slept at all. She walked down the cracked sidewalk, barefoot, dust sticking to her feet, head pounding. The world moved fast around her, folks grabbing coffee, buses honking, kids laughing on their way to school. Nobody looked her way. She might as well have been a ghost. By noon, she was desperate. She walked up to a diner, hands shaking, voice soft. "Please, ma'am, can you spare a little food?" The waitress gave her one long look like she was dirt on the floor and snapped, "Go get a job, little girl." Tasha's chest burned, but she kept walking. Hunger didn't care about pride. She sat on the curb and thought about that chicken leg, the one piece of meat that started all this. She almost laughed. Funny how folks throw you out for what you never even touched. Later that day, she passed a convenience store. A group of teens stood outside, sipping sodas and laughing. One of them, a skinny boy with braids, noticed her. He dug into his pocket, pulled out half a honey bun, and handed it over. "Don't die out here," he said. Tasha blinked, took it like it was treasure. "Thanks." The boy just shrugged. "Ain't nothing." He walked off before she could say more. She ate that honey bun slow, like it was steak and potatoes, each bite stretching longer than the last. For a second, she almost felt human again. But when night fell, the city turned mean. Streetlights flickered like broken promises. She tried to rest under the bus stop, but some drunk stumbled by, muttering curses, and she bolted. She ended up near the river, curled up under an old bench, shivering as the air grew damp. Her stomach twisted like it wanted to eat itself. She whispered into the dark, "Lord, do you see me at all?" No answer, just the water lapping and the sound of a dog barking somewhere far off. The second night was worse, the hunger mixed with fear. She passed a group of older boys huddled around a trash fire. One of them smirked, whistled at her. "Hey, lil' mama, come sit with us." His eyes glowed wild in the firelight. Her gut screamed, "Run!" She clutched her thin dress and took off, barefoot on the concrete, heart pounding so loud she thought it might explode. She didn't stop until she found an alley behind a laundromat. She crawled into the corner, knees scraped, chest heaving, and prayed they didn't follow. When dawn came, her lips were cracked, her body numb. She dragged herself to the park and sat on a swing that creaked like it hadn't held weight in years. A little boy pointed at her and said, "Mama, why that girl looks so sad?" His mother yanked his hand and hurried away without a word. Tasha stared at her reflection in the shiny part of the swing chain. Hair messy, eyes hollow, face older than her age. She thought maybe this is what forgotten looks like. Maybe this is what dying feels like before you actually die. And still, somewhere deep inside, she felt a small, stubborn spark. She wasn't gone yet. Something in her whispered that the story wasn't over, not for her. The streets might be cold, the world might be cruel, but she hadn't taken her last step, not yet. She closed her eyes, holding on to that spark even as the night crept back and the hunger clawed harder than before. Chapter 3. The First Lady's Secret. Camille Johnson sat in a big, quiet room that felt too rich to be real. The curtains were heavy, the chandelier sparkled like diamonds, but none of it brought her peace. She was the First Lady of Alabama, wife of Governor Marcus Johnson, and folks thought she had it all. But deep down, she carried a silence heavier than gold. She had spent years smiling for cameras, shaking hands, cutting ribbons at hospitals, but at night, when the house went still, she sat in front of her mirror and stared at her empty hands. No matter how much money, no matter how many doctors, her arms stayed childless. One evening, Camille picked up the latest medical report. Same words she had read 100 times before. Nothing wrong, all normal. She laughed bitterly. Normal? If I'm so normal, why ain't I holding a baby by now? Her laughter cracked into tears. She buried her face in her palms, sobbing until her silk sleeves were wet. Marcus knocked softly, walked in with his usual calm face. He had a state to run, but tonight he just looked at her, concerned. Camille, you've been quiet all day. You ain't even touched dinner. I'm fine, she lied, but her voice broke. You've been saying I'm fine for 10 years, he sighed, sitting beside her. Talk to me. But she couldn't, not yet. So she turned away, whispering, You wouldn't understand. Later that week, desperate, Camille did something she had sworn she'd never do. She went to see a prophet. An old preacher folks in Birmingham swore could see through your soul like glass. His church smelled of candle wax and old wood. He poured oil into a bowl, stared into it like it held secrets from heaven. He spoke without looking at her. You've been carrying guilt, ma'am, for over 20 years. Camille's heart skipped. What guilt? She whispered, trying to sound calm. The preacher didn't flinch. You had a baby, 17 years old, scared, alone. You left her by a church doorstep. Her throat closed up. The room spun. Old memories clawed back. The crying, the panic, the way she wrapped that newborn in a thin blanket and placed her near a church door before running away into the night. The preacher's voice was steady. That child is alive, but she suffers. Her pain is tied to your womb. Until you find her, the chain remains locked. Camille covered her mouth, trembling. She whispered, I just wanted her to have a better chance. I was young, broke, no family. I didn't know what else to do. He shook his head gently. Your intentions don't erase her pain. A child never forgets being left behind. The tears of the abandoned cry louder than prayers of the rich. Her knees weakened. She clutched the pew, shaking all over. So what do I do now? Find her, the preacher said simply. Find her before the world finds her first, because destiny don't wait forever. That night, Camille returned to the governor's mansion, quiet as a shadow. She sat across from Marcus in their private lounge. He was sipping coffee, reading briefing papers. She set her hands on the table, staring at him until he looked up. What is it? He asked, concern written in his eyes. Her lips trembled. I had a child before you. I told you back then it was an abortion, but I lied. I gave birth. I left her by a church in Montgomery, and she's out there somewhere. Silence filled the room like thunder. Marcus leaned back slowly, rubbing his forehead. His voice was low. So all these years, we've been wondering why, and the answer's been walking around breathing. Camille broke down, sobbing harder than she ever had. I've lived every day wondering if she survived, if somebody took her in, if she hates me. And now the prophet says she's alive, suffering, and it's my fault. Marcus placed his coffee cup down, fists clenched. He looked at his wife and said with quiet fire, "Then we find her. We got money, power, the whole state at our fingertips. We won't rest until she's back where she belongs." For the first time in years, Camille felt a tiny flicker of hope. But hope came with fear. Because what if the child she left behind looked her in the eyes one day and said, "I don't want you"? That thought kept her awake all night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if forgiveness was even possible for a mother who ran away. Chapter 4: The Search Begins. By the time the sun came up the next morning, the whole state of Alabama was buzzing like a kicked-over beehive. It was all over the radio, on every TV station. Even pastors were shouting about it from the pulpit. The First Lady had dropped a bombshell. She was offering $1 million to anybody who could help her find the daughter she gave up 20 years ago. Phones in the governor's mansion rang non-stop. Reporters camped outside the gates, shouting questions through the iron bars. Some people praised Camille for her honesty. Others said it was just a stunt for sympathy. But inside, Camille sat on the edge of her velvet chair, her hands shaking, waiting for the phone to ring with real news. It didn't take long for the hustlers to show up. By lunchtime, the mansion had already seen 5 different daughters. One girl showed up holding fake church records printed on fresh paper. Another pulled up her sleeve and flashed a birthmark, except the security guard wiped it with a napkin and the marker smudged right off. Camille almost laughed through her tears. Lord, folks really think a Sharpie gonna make me hug them? But mostly she felt crushed. Each time a girl walked through those doors, her heart leapt, hoping. And every time the truth cracked apart, she died a little more inside. The governor tried to stay calm. Marcus stood tall in front of the cameras, promising resources, promising to use every tool in the book. But in private, he watched his wife fall apart. At night, he held her while she whispered, "What if she's dead? What if I never see her again?" Meanwhile, the streets had their own version of the news. In Montgomery barbershops, old men leaned back in chairs, saying, "1 million? Man, if I was 10 years younger, I'd claim I'm her daughter myself." Laughter filled the room, but everybody's eyes said the same thing. That kind of money could change a whole family forever. Tasha heard about it too in her own way. She was standing outside a diner staring through the glass at folks eating plates of eggs and bacon when the TV over the counter flashed Camille's tearful face. The headline rolled across the screen. First Lady searches for long-lost daughter. Tasha pressed her hand to the glass, staring at that woman's eyes. Something about them twisted in her chest like déjà vu she couldn't explain. But the cashier inside shooed her away. "Hey, get lost, kid, you're scaring my customers." She stumbled back onto the sidewalk, hugging herself. She didn't know why that woman's face felt so familiar. She just knew it made her heart ache. Back at the mansion, the tips kept flooding in. A church lady swore she once rocked the missing baby to sleep. A man called saying his niece had the same birthday. Somebody even tried to sell an old photograph of a random toddler, claiming it was proof. Angela, the First Lady's assistant, sifted through stacks of papers until her eyes went red. She whispered, "Ma'am, 90% of this is garbage." Camille didn't care. She kept saying the same thing. Check every single one. I don't care if it's a scam. Somewhere in all this noise, my baby's voice is crying out. That night, Camille went on live television for an interview. She looked straight into the camera, her voice trembling. For years, I told myself I had no choice. I was young, scared, and poor. But that doesn't excuse leaving my child behind. Now I have to find her. Even if she never forgives me, she deserves to know the truth. People watching at home got quiet. Some wiped their eyes, others shook their heads. Some said, "Oh, she's brave." Others muttered, "She's crazy." But nobody turned the channel. And somewhere, sitting under a flickering streetlight with a crust of bread in her lap, Tasha whispered to herself, "Why do I feel like she's talking to me?" The city didn't answer. The night kept moving. But destiny had already started pulling two lives closer, like magnets that didn't know they belonged together yet. Chapter 5. Crossing Paths. Tasha dragged her tired legs through the streets of Montgomery like a ghost. Her dress hung loose on her frame, her feet raw from walking, and her belly hollow. She had heard whispers about a church that once took in babies, a place where abandoned children got left on doorsteps. Something inside her said, "Go there." She didn't know why, but it felt like the only direction left. By late afternoon, she reached the tall brick church. The doors looked heavy, the paint chipped, but it still stood strong. She gathered every bit of courage she had and knocked on the office door. A woman in a gray sweater opened halfway, eyes sharp and tired. "What do you want?" the woman asked. Tasha lowered her head. "Please, ma'am, I used to live here. They told me I was adopted from this church when I was little. I got nowhere else to go." The woman shook her head quick. "We don't take teenagers. State rules. Only under 10. You understand?" "Please, I'll sweep, I'll wash clothes. I just need a place to lay down," Tasha begged, her voice cracking. The woman's eyes narrowed. "You think you're the only one suffering? We full. Ain't no room here. Go back to your people." "I ain't got no people," Tasha whispered. But the door slammed in her face. She stood frozen for a moment, then sank to her knees right there on the church steps. Her hands fell limp against her sides, her tears soaking the dusty ground. Children inside peeked through the stained glass windows, whispering to each other, "She's crying. She's dirty." Nobody came out to help. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky orange. Tasha curled up by the church wall, trying to keep herself upright, but her body swayed like it was ready to give out. She pressed her forehead against the cold brick and thought, maybe this was it. Maybe life had nothing left for her. Then came the sound, sirens in the distance, sharp and heavy. A whole line of black SUVs turned onto the street, lights flashing like a parade. The churchyard stirred. Kids ran out, pointing, "It's the First Lady, she's here!" The nannies rushed to line them up, shouting, "Stand straight, don't embarrass us." The whole place buzzed like a festival. Camille Johnson stepped out of the first SUV in her navy blue suit, heels clicking on the pavement, her face calm but her eyes tired. She had come chasing a new tip, another lead about her missing daughter. She was used to disappointment by now, but something in her spirit kept saying, "Don't stop." As she walked toward the church gates, her eyes caught a shape by the steps. A girl slumped against the wall, skinny, dirt on her cheeks, dress torn. At first, Camille thought it was just another homeless kid, one of many she had seen during her outreach programs. But then the girl lifted her head slowly, like it took everything she had left. For a heartbeat, the world went still. Camille's eyes locked on hers. It wasn't the face, not the clothes, not even the tears. It was the eyes. Familiar, too familiar. They burned like a mirror to her own. The guards tried to move the girl aside. "Step back, miss. Don't crowd the entrance." But Camille raised her hand. "Wait." Her voice was firm, trembling at the same time. She stepped closer, heels clicking slower now, her breath shaky. Tasha blinked, confused. She didn't know if this fancy woman was friend or foe. She wanted to run, but her legs had nothing left. Camille stopped right in front of her, close enough to see the dirt under her fingernails, close enough to see how hunger had carved her face. And then Camille whispered, almost to herself, "My God." Could it be? The crowd behind her buzzed with whispers, phones flashing, cameras ready. The air was heavy, like everyone knew something important was happening. But only the two of them heard the silence between those words. Two hearts, one broken by abandonment, the other by regret, beating in the same rhythm without knowing why. The moment felt too big, too fragile, like a glass about to shatter. Neither of them moved, neither of them spoke again. Destiny had brought them to the same steps, but what came next was still hanging in the air, waiting to crash down. Chapter 6. Eyes That Tell the Truth. The street in front of the church went silent, like even the cicadas stopped buzzing just to watch. Camille stood there, face to face with the girl who looked too much like her younger self. Tasha's knees shook, but she didn't move. She wasn't sure if this woman was about to save her, or just pity her. The governor's security detail stepped forward, ready to push people back, but Camille raised her hand again. "Not this one. Let her be." Her voice cracked, soft but firm. She knelt down right there on the dusty sidewalk, her fine suit brushing against the dirt. "Baby," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to Tasha or to God. "What's your name?" Tasha's throat felt dry like sandpaper. "Tasha," she muttered. Camille blinked, her eyes wet. "Tasha, Lord have mercy, do you know who I am?" Tasha shook her head, hugging herself. "You look like somebody off TV. Rich people don't talk to girls like me." Her voice cracked into a bitter laugh, sharp and sad at the same time. Something in Camille's chest split open. She wanted to say it right then. "I'm your mother." But fear held her tongue. What if the girl hated her? What if the truth only made her run? Behind them, neighbors whispered, recording on their phones, already spinning rumors. That homeless girl, she might be the one. First Lady found her baby. The air felt heavy, like the whole city was holding its breath. Marcus Johnson finally stepped out of one of the SUVs. He walked toward them with the calm of a man used to cameras, but his eyes betrayed him, wide, shaken, hopeful. He looked at his wife, then at Tasha, then back. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Tasha tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Marcus reached out instinctively, but Camille caught her first, pulling the girl into her arms. Tasha stiffened, body tense like she wasn't used to being held. But slowly her head leaned against Camille's shoulder, too weak to fight anymore. "I'm so sorry," Camille whispered, her tears soaking into Tasha's hair. "I'm so sorry." Tasha wanted to push her away. She wanted to scream. "Where were you when I was hungry? Where were you when I was cold on the street?" But the words tangled in her chest, drowning in the strange warmth of that embrace. It had been so long since anyone held her like she mattered. The crowd clapped, some cried, some cheered. Phones lit up the night like fireflies. But for Tasha and Camille, the noise faded away. Tasha pulled back just enough to look her in the eyes, the same eyes. For the first time, she saw the reflection of herself not as trash, not as a burden, but as something claimed. "Why now?" Tasha asked softly. Camille swallowed hard. "Because I was a coward then. But I'm not leaving you again, not ever." Silence lingered. Then Tasha, broken and tired, nodded once. Not forgiveness yet, but not rejection either. Just the first step. Marcus placed his hand on both of their shoulders. He didn't speak much, but his eyes said it clear. Family wasn't just about blood. It was about choosing each other even after mistakes, even after years of pain. The convoy engines hummed, waiting. The church bells rang faintly in the distance like heaven itself was trying to mark the moment. Tasha let out a shaky breath. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible, and somewhere deep inside she understood. Sometimes the people who broke you are the only ones who can help put you back together. Sometimes the circle of life bends all the way back, forcing wounds into lessons and shame into second chances. The night swallowed their figures as they walked toward the SUVs together. A broken girl and a mother who never stopped looking, both carrying scars, both stepping into a future none of them fully trusted yet. But for that moment on that street in Montgomery, hope had the last word.